Hi, Money Magicians. How are you? So, welcome to episode 56 of the Money Magic Podcast. You've just joined us. My name is Mangilo Makwakwa, and I help women of color heal ancestral money trauma so that they can fall in love with their bank accounts, increase income, and live their best lives. I'm also the author of Heart, Mind, and Money Using Emotional Intelligence for Financial Success. So, you guys have heard me interview various people who are in my mastermind, and I've been talking a lot about this mastermind in the US. You've seen Lisa come on this show and talk about it, Lisa Kuzman. You've heard Casey talk about this. You've also heard Agnes come through and share her experiences about the mastermind. I have actually got the woman on here, our coach who runs the mastermind. You guys have heard us probably refer to her in other episodes. Well, she is on here now. So, welcome, Lisa. Thank you so much for saying yes to this interview.
Of course, absolutely. I had no idea that the mastermind women were coming through. I love
They've
it.
been interviewed.
I love
We've
that.
already had awesome discussions. They've been interviewed. It's been amazing.
Oh my goodness. Okay, well, I can't wait
We've
to check out those
spoken about
episodes.
you. We've spoken about the mastermind. You had no clue this was all going on.
I did not, but I love it. That's why we gather as women, right? To support each other. So I'm just loving that you all were connecting and sharing, and I can't wait to check out these episodes.
Oh my gosh, their interviews have been incredible. You'll listen to some of them. I'm sure as they go out, you probably by the time this is, you've seen some of their interviews. In fact, I think Casey's is coming out in about 4 weeks, 3 weeks. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
So it's
Okay.
so interesting. 3 weeks from when we're recording,
Yeah.
right? So it's awesome. So I just wanted to say before we even launch into things, people have heard snippets of this mastermind, what we do, etc. Please tell us about who you are, what do you do, how do you describe yourself as a human being,
Ooh.
what are your hobbies, all that stuff.
That is shifting big. In fact, actually, my personal the way I've been referencing myself of most recent, and certainly by the time this airs, is really leaning into my identity as a shapeshifter and kind of letting go of other identities. In fact, much of my adulthood has been the willingness to let go of identities that either were projected onto me at a young age or I internalized somewhere in my youth. And so, I can give the official credibility stats. I'll do that. But when you ask the question, that is where I truly went. So I wanted to be authentic to
No,
what came
please
up for
go
me.
there. I mean, we've had people define themselves as a curious souls, whatever. Like your definition is whatever you make of it. We've had
I
all
like
sorts
it.
of
You can
different
sit back.
like descriptions on here. So this is why I'm like what you do and how you define yourself as a human being or as a soul or spirit, whichever.
Yeah. Well, so now it's coming to me, and I'll loop it all in. Um, is that I understand myself to exist on this planet in this lifetime for two reasons. One, to support the elevation of voices that have been unheard in the world, in society, be it through systemic oppression and systemic erasure, ignoring, dismissing of various peoples. And two, to support the use of expression as a vehicle of healing, of growth, of liberation, and of collective empowerment. And this mastermind, which you've heard of now, the All Access Mastermind, um, the reason that I created it was to pour into women who are truly creating leadership in really unique ways. Um, and what I want to see for all of us, self included, is to understand that the gifts we uniquely hold are the exact gifts that the people around us, that the world needs. And when we're willing to show up with those gifts, whatever they are, and express them, that is when we are in our highest service and thereby our highest leadership. Um, so I look at leadership as a leadership coach. I look at leadership um, as something that all of us have, not a title that someone gives you. So I think that is my highest service. The ways people will be seeing me on the interwebs is
I
that,
love that.
oh, thank you.
Oh
Um,
my gosh. And I think you do that so well, by the way. You definitely embody that. It's
I
beautiful.
appreciate that. Thank
You
you.
know, like I just want you to also share around the mastermind because people have heard me share all about it throughout. So maybe not so much on this podcast because I knew I'd be interviewing you, but also just around how I've never had, I tell everyone that I've never had a mastermind that is structured the way that your mastermind is structured, right? Like you hold space for women of color and white women, and then you separate us into pods and then you bring us together. And I found that to be extremely healing for me, where I've been in masterminds where I've shared with you so guys, when I came to LiSara, I was like, I just want a woman of color to be the one leading the mastermind for me, because in other masterminds, I felt like I disappeared and that like people that looked like me were not given a voice. So
Right.
what led
Exactly.
you to create this mastermind? Was that the same thinking behind that? Was that
Yeah.
the same kind of thinking that women of color need a place where they can have a voice and be heard? Because our issues are sometimes different and unique to us. And when we sometimes bring up certain things, it's like you get glazed eyes and it can be so uncomfortable if you're literally the only one in the mastermind that looks like
Right.
that. Like, but my market is literally the African continent, and you have just spoken about nothing but America.
Right.
Like, how can I relate to this? Like, what are you talking about? That will work in your market. And then it feels like,
Right.
and I've always felt like it's been received as, often I felt like it was received as, well, maybe you're just not thinking positive enough. Or, well, that's a market that's so strange. We can't even begin to even imagine it, which I told you that was my fear when I started in the mastermind. I was like, oh my God.
Well, I'm so glad that one, that you accepted it despite the fear, and I can imagine everyone listening also is too. And speaking of which, you were already doing it, right? There are people listening who have followed you for years. So,
Yeah.
we only came together a year ago. And that's the other thing that's, I believe, is so fun about our gifts is that we're already living them, even when we're in fear of living them in a particular way. Um,
Oh, that's
but
so interesting. You know, sorry to interrupt this, but
no,
you
you're great.
remind me of Oprah. I remember listening to an Oprah interview, and Oprah said she would be Oprah even if she was selling shoes. And she used the shoe lady example. I remember that. And she said she believes that if she was a shoe saleswoman, she would have been the best shoe saleswoman that there was, because she would do it as Oprah.
Exactly, right? And we're always going to show up as our best selves when we remember that. When
Yeah.
we don't um, when we don't shift ourselves because of who's around us.
Mm.
And I too, of course, as probably many people, many of my Black women, people of color, just showing up in spaces that we're the only or the one of very few, or even if there are multiple people, or even a majority potentially, that there is some other voice that's potentially leading the way or holding the space or getting the most attention, the most resources, etc. I mean, this is literally what we see in the world today.
Mm.
We live in a really Eurocentric and in many ways American centric, US centric
Yeah.
world, through cultural imperialism. So
Yes.
it's because we humans are social beings and we grow up in, with family members, with village, with community, there is this really important mechanism of us belonging, And as a result of that, and also as a result of even how we learn, so I'm trained as a linguist, even how we learn our first language is through imitation, right?
Yes.
We're imitating what our parents or guardians or whoever's around us is saying. And because of this mechanism that is really supportive for our initial learning, which is imitation, which is being like the others,
Yeah.
it can be in direct conflict to the use of our gifts that are unique to us and showing up and expressing those in a way that doesn't look like anything we've ever seen. And
Yes.
because we've been so socialized to make sure that we're showing up in a way that has us, quote, fit in or belong, because that is a strong human social need, it can feel like there's conflict, which, you know, makes the fear so clear. Of like, of course it's scary if you've never let yourself deviate because you've learned that the safety, the security, the belonging is coming from the being a part of, and being a part of in many places, not all, but in many communities is by being similar to the others or acting similarly to the others. And a big part of why I created the mastermind is to, now I want to speak to the pods that you mentioned as well.
Yeah.
But the main thing was, and it's called the All Access Mastermind. The main thing is really to see women be in their unique gifts, which is why we have the private coaching element,
Yeah.
and be willing to show up with those in community, which is why we come back together. And to your point, as we women of color, Black women, as we know, when we're in community with people who are like us, when, gosh, it's such like a respite from so many things in the world, when we can say something and be understood.
Yes.
So it was, as an anti-racist educator, making sure that I prioritize the most marginalized identity voices in the room is of my utmost priority. And by the way, I highlight the word identity because in a system that is oppressive, the identity is what gets marginalized. Not, I personally do not feel marginalized.
Yes.
And I make this distinction because without the distinction, it can be really disempowering. Well, I'm Black, therefore I'm supposed to be marginalized. I'm supposed to be poor. I'm supposed to not be educated in the same way. I'm not supposed to have the same access to resources, etc. The system is what teaches that, right? And it has examples of that apartheid. I mean, my goodness, there are examples all over the world.
Yeah.
When we're willing to make that distinction and go, oh, that's the identity, I'm still gonna show up in my most powerful. It is still okay for me to show up in my most powerful being and self and have that normalized by other sisters and women and folks who share this identity that I share, right? This outward facing identity.
Yes.
So that we can normalize the experience of being empowered in a system that systemically perpetuates oppression. And so that is the reason that we would break into these pods based on identity and then come back together, so that it's really three levels. It's the private experience where we are really going into almost excavating, like where's the gift, like we're uncovering all the crap
I
that we
love
don't have,
that.
right? Like we're bringing out the specific unique gifts. We're coming together in sisterhood with those who share a similar identity, right? Because as we know, similar issues and things that we're working through, shared cultural references or understandings, even if our specific tribes, villages, experiences are different, there are still shared similarities based on the greater like outer view of our identity. And then of course coming together with all the women, and particularly, again, as I mentioned, my focus on elevating the voices that have not been heard. When I created the mastermind, what I really wanted to see is the Black women and the women of color have an experience of truly being prioritized in a mixed space.
Yes, I love that actually. It was one of the things that I truly loved, right? And that I keep loving about the mastermind is that, again, I never feel like my voice disappears and is not heard. I think I find it interesting that in the coaching space where most coaches talk about trauma, they never touch on racial trauma and they never see it as perpetuated even in their work.
Right.
That really shocks me, to be perfectly frank. It's like, I feel like you can't talk about trauma without talking about systemic trauma. You can't talk about trauma without talking about patriarchy and racism, because these things have impacted us. So actually, a lot of coaches are willing, especially white women coaches, are willing to talk about the patriarchy, but they'll never ever wade into race, right? And ever look at race as a trauma, because it makes them uncomfortable. So in that way, you have not done your work, because the work isn't supposed to be so comfortable. Of course, it's going to be uncomfortable. And like, if you're holding space for me and I'm talking about ancestral trauma, and then you say that you're doing ancestral healing, you need to acknowledge that at some point, there's going to be a thing that comes up with my ancestors and how your ancestors have perpetuated some types of oppressive systems towards my ancestors, and that we have to be able to hold that space.
Yes.
Like if someone has, so I've always wondered about that. Are you truly doing trauma work if you don't acknowledge how systems impact and how society is being built, how it impacts an individual and leads to trauma, how it aids in traumatizing us as individuals?
Exactly. So well said. And yeah, most people aren't. The answer is no for a lot of people, right? People are like willing to look at certain types of traumas and not others, to your point. And that was another thing with the mastermind. It's very long, explicit set of rules and boundaries that all would abide by, namely the white women, in order to be in the space. And understanding that was not the place to unpack any of that.
I loved those rules, by the way. When I read that, I was like, oh God, thank you. I will not have to deal with microaggressions. Oh my goodness.
Right. Yeah, so nobody would even, it's the high ticket mastermind. Nobody would even think to join after reading that if they were caught up in some of this stuff. And with a few of the women, white women, when we had our call for them to join, there were questions of like, I really want to make sure that I'm not doing this, or, not causing harm unintentionally. So like some fear around, right, not unintentionally causing harm. And because I personally am such a fierce protector, I was like, if you say something, it'll get swat down before you have any chance to elaborate. And actually, that has not happened, I think, in the larger groups.
No, it hasn't actually.
It's also why it's great for them to have as well that pod, because there have been times when it's come up there, which is an absolutely appropriate time for it to come up, right? Again, a shared experience based on their identity. And then we also have another program that they get access to learn how to do their work.
So, oh, wow, that's beautiful.
Yeah, I wasn't taking anyone without that commitment, because to your point, if you're going to call yourself a transformational leader, and particularly as a coach, a healer, a guide, to pretend that you are facilitating transformation inside of a system where oppression exists without addressing that oppression is exactly that, is pretending.
Yes. Oh my God, thank you. Like, oh my gosh. So guys, anyone that knows me and follows my work on Facebook, has followed me, you understand why I'm in love with this mastermind, right? You understand why I so enjoyed it, because it's all this. I feel like this is such incredible work. So Lisa, I know that you started off as a linguist. And now you're here. You're helping leaders become better leaders and teaching us about equity and transformation and all this incredible stuff and finding our soul purpose and leaning more into it. How do you come to do this work?
Oh, good question. I think I was.
How do you start from linguist to here? Like, I mean, wow.
You know, it's funny, I haven't thought of it in exactly that way. How did I come to this place? And I think it was my own realization, my own journey of being in the wrong places with my gifts. So for context, I figured more about my quote identities would come out as we go along. So I'm trained as a
please, I was about to say, do you want to share about your gifts as well? Because people need to know, guys. Lisa plays the djembe drums, and I feel like I told her I feel like my soul is splitting apart. We've had sessions where like I just fall asleep because like my entire ancestors are like, just sleep, child. This is what she's now doing in the mastermind. And I'll be like, oops, sorry, missed most of the session because you played the drums. And my body couldn't take it. Like my being could not take this.
But that's exactly what was, you know, like what you needed in the moment was that. So kudos to you for letting yourself have it. I mean, that's so much of the thing too, right? When we talk about being willing to show up in the world as ourselves and step into our highest calling and say yes. It is often letting ourselves do the thing that we didn't think we're supposed to do, right? Or that we could do. And so my journey to answer the question around, so I'm trained as a forensic linguist. If that's a new phrase, it's essentially the application of linguistics, the study of language, to the law and legal system. And the most famous case that involved this kind of work is an American guy called, well, he wasn't American, but in the US, called the Unabomber. I won't give the whole story. He sent bombs with messages. He wasn't doing the best stuff, but long story short.
I think there's actually a story of him on Netflix, I believe. So
and there are lots of podcasts, Netflix. So it does exist out there. But basically the linguistic evidence, the letters that this person wrote, the words that they used, they were highly educated, so they had a lot to say. And basically, because they had a lot to say, what's so cool about forensic linguistics is that you can actually understand a lot of information about a person by the language that they use. Written, spoken, doesn't matter. Signed, doesn't matter.
Oh, wow.
And so the study of forensic linguistics supports understanding things in cases, legal cases, where there's linguistic evidence. Who wrote that? Who was the perpetrator? Who said all the da-da-da?
Oh my goodness.
So as one could potentially imagine, that's heavy. It's like my very last case. I'm feeling, if you're a super visual person, I invite you to think of bunnies while I say this, because this is heavy. The very last case that I was, that I was analyzing, the linguistic evidence was language, was writing on the wall in the victim's blood. And so we had the pictures of the words, and that was that was what I was looking at.
Like, I can imagine why you were just like, I'm done.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, that makes
that ended. And then I was in this corporate-esque world. I wasn't in the corporate world. I was on the edge of it as an interpreter at corporate trade shows. So I was flown around the world to do this. A man actually came up to me once, never seen him before or since, but came up to me once, probably in my second to last year of doing that work. I don't remember his exact words, but it was something to the effect of, "We both know you're not supposed to be here." Wow. And he just kept walking. And it was very much like the message was transmitted. I received the
And
I
you
am
think he
not
was
his best
real because we're
surgeon.
South African, there's South Africans listening to this, so we might as well just get there. You think this man was human?
I'm so grateful for these.
Because I don't want to get the questions asked after this podcast.
He appeared human, but yes, I've had a number of angels show up like that I very much appreciate. Even as recently as 3 weeks ago in LA, said nothing. Oh, it was so beautiful. He said nothing. It was in a gas station. He pulled up behind me. I turned. He was just staring, and it wasn't, there's like the creepy man who stares or the man who's interested and stares. And it was so energetically clear to me that was not that. He was simply there to affirm me on the path. Yeah, I feel chills remembering. I just remember as I drove off just crying. I was like, okay, like, I'm listening, thank you. And he even after I pulled out, as I was leaving the station, I saw him look at me again, and it was just, yeah, such an affirming, strong, secure presence. It was so beautiful, so beautiful.
Oh my God.
But the way I got here where I am today is through a lot of trusting and listening to the gifts and being willing to shed the identities that said I needed to stay in the linguistic realm in that way, or I needed to stay doing the corporate-y stuff, or I needed to stay. Even when I first started coaching, I was coaching as a women's love and relationship coach. And so I put myself, it's like we put ourselves in these little boxes. So I was like putting myself in these boxes. And the thing that got me to where I am today is being willing to step out of them, willing to shed an identity that fueled a limiting belief that said I have to stay here because I, quote unquote, I am blank. Therefore, I must operate by blank rules, and I must carry these blank beliefs.
Yes.
And the point where I am now is, I identify as a musician and an artist. I host the music medicine membership, which, yes, does.
Tell us more about that. I mean, I just told them about the djembe drum splitting my soul into pieces. Every time, guys, every time. I love it.
I appreciate that. Yeah, so it's just using, in my case, the gift of voice to, and I keep playing with this scarf because it has all these music notes on it. So I am here for music and voice and expression. Because the thing is, when we, and please, as you're listening to this, feel free to close your eyes and imagine this for yourself, what your version of this is. But when we are creating, in whatever form you create, when you are creating, you are in your place of power. You are tapping into the universal creation. And you get to literally see how powerful you are, how much of a manifester you are. Not because you have some expectation of the thing that you're going to create, but just because you decided to do it and you let something come out of you, right? Whether it's something you're writing, singing, visual art, birthing an actual human, birthing a business, birthing a new idea of how you're going to, meet your money goals, birthing the exodus of ancestrally held trauma that you've carried in the womb, or you've carried somewhere in your body, or your encoding. That is when you're in your power, when you're creating. And so letting that form of expression, whatever it be, to support guiding the healing, guiding the growth, that is what I've found from all of these different places that I've externally been in terms of identity, the job, the title, whatever. Even as an anti-racist trainer and educator, and I do have a consultancy around diversity, equity, and inclusion, I fit myself into that box for a while. I remember just sat there, and there's nothing wrong, for clarity, of having these specific titles. Labels are very important for human understanding, right? We give something a label
Yep.
so that we can process it. And sometimes when we finally have a label for something, I'm like, oh, it's fulfilling because our brain
It
can
makes
wrap.
it easier to understand what the heck this person is about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So definitely want to uplift the importance of that.
Yeah.
And when we attach a meaning to it that says, I have to stay here, and I can't go anywhere else, that is when the label is no longer supportive. Right? So the idea, especially as folks who carry marginalized identities, the idea that like, oh yeah, I'm supposed to not have access to that thing that all those other people have access to.
Yep.
I'm going to put this person, there's somebody, I'm just going to keep it 100, and you'll know when I say this, there is somebody listening right now who puts you, Vanille, on a pedestal because you are a Black woman and you've done it in their eyes.
Yeah.
And that pedestalization, or I call it pedestalization, is a means of keeping yourself saying, okay, well, I can't do it because
And
of my
she
beliefs.
can, right?
She can because she did something else, because she's got something else on. And I am here to tell you, I'm here to tell you that you can do the thing.
Yeah.
And not in this BS, like positive rah that Americans are known for.
Yeah.
I'm here to tell you that whatever belief, whether it's conscious to you right now or not, whatever belief is connected to your identity that says, oh, that's not me, thereby I don't do that. And the thing that you're saying you don't do is something you want to do.
Yep.
That's a place where you can excavate, what is the identity that I'm holding on to, that's telling, what's the label about myself I'm holding on to that's telling me this is not possible. And I want to give an exact context, so that it doesn't feel so theoretical. When I first started, this is about love, when I first started coaching women, I realized most of the women I was working with were single and they wanted partners.
Yes.
That makes sense. They signed up for a relationship coach. They're single, they want a partner. Okay.
I am a relationship coach.
Heck yeah. And that's another thing. People are not shown positive examples of how to relate. That's a whole nother podcast. But anyway.
Yes. Actually, my entire relationship coaching wasn't just about romantic relationships. It was a lot to do with just relationship in general. I was like,
yes.
Why does no one teach us this? How to be a better sibling? How to be a better friend? How to be a better human for society as well? Nobody
it starts with the relationship to ourselves. Everything is relationship. Right now, so many who are listening and follow this podcast, you're concerned about your relationship to money, your relationship to the beliefs, your relationship to your ancestors. So relationship does underlie everything. And this example that I want to share about these women who were single, not wanting to be single, is this. We would usually come to a point where we would find that their identity as a single woman was so strong that to have a partner would be the death of that identity, and thereby the death of some part of them. And they weren't willing to do that. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. Actually, as you're talking about this, it also just reminds me of a coaching session that we had, where you were talking about the death of the parts of me that have struggled, and me not wanting to let them go, because like I'm so used to the struggle and like the constant needing to heal the wounded parts of me, that like it's been scary. Like I'm still in the process of that. I'm hoping to completely allow them to integrate and let them just die their natural death as they integrate into my entire system. But like these parts of me don't want that identity of the struggle. The Vanille who struggles financially, who struggles, who works hard. like that identity is at odds with the ease, with the expansion, which we've spoken about, like that. I find it so hard to step into the expansive part of me. And a huge part of that is around that. It's so funny. Like, this is like the second time I'm talking about this today.
I'm glad, because this is real.
Today before this recording with a friend. And it's just like, wow. So it's still definitely working through that. So to keep the identity alive, to do the opposite of what you want, like to get the man or to get the finances and the money, would mean you have to let this identity go, because that is stepping into the new identity. Now the new identity that is you is the expensive identity. And relationshiping identity. So yeah, I get what you're saying.
Totally. I appreciate that example too, because gosh, that's so relevant. I think that's even more relevant. I'm sure there are single women listening, but like this is even more relevant. The connection to struggle, not only because of a personal identity that we keep around it, but because speaking of things that are in the system and in society, and I see this a lot with Black women. And when I say Black women, I mean from all places where we find Black people, period. The ability to connect more easily around struggle, like to connect with each other socially, right?
Yes.
As opposed to connecting from a place of full abundance, of queendom, of everything is, and not like the fake independent woman, but the truly like feeling abundant place. And
I think we don't know how to do that, to be honest, Lisa. Like when I was hosting my Thai retreat, my co-host, who was also at that retreat, Mizo, she said, my property podcast co-host, guys, I run 2 podcasts. So one of it is with my co-host Mizo for the property podcast. And she said something powerful at that retreat. And she was crying as she was saying this. She was like, it's scary to expand because Black women know how to hold each other in struggle, but we don't know how to hold each other in expansion. So we know how to come together for our funerals, for men beating us up, for all that drama, but we don't know. And you see it also even on social media. We don't know how to come together for your man is treating you so well, all that stuff. We don't know how to deal with that. And so there's so much fear around that. And it's funny with this identity, as I've been like working on it and it's so strong. Part of it is that fear, right? Is that if I now fully allow this identity to heal and integrate, and I'm just like, now I'm looking into full on magic and I'm just going, then oh my God, nobody will want to be around me. I will be unidentifiable. Right? And then like, I don't want to deal with snarky comments like, ooh, now you think you're white, or oh my God, you're being bougie, etc.
Right. Yes. Yes. Exactly. Yeah. And the other thing too, those comments are real. Yes. Those people, PS, if you experience that or you're that person, opportunity to check yourself and to see where your own need to hold this identity is playing in. If you're around people like that, as you're starting to experience success, it doesn't mean you have to, a lot of people talk about just like dropping your old circle. And I want to say, it doesn't mean that you have to drop anyone. There is an opportunity to invite them in to it and have that conversation. And actually, I remember at this really important turning point on my own journey, literally talking to each of my family, like called them up one by one, my immediate family members, and said like, hey, I don't remember my exact language, but basically, the way you've known me to act and behave is shifting. And so I just want you to understand what's coming and why. And what that does is you don't have to, change their opinion. They could be like, whatever, she's still the same, right? They can have whatever opinion they want. But what you are doing, one is inviting them to see you in that new light that you are claiming and stepping into. And two, it allows you to declare to them and also to the universe, this is who I'm choosing to be now. And so they have the opportunity, the people that are close to you that you care about, they have an opportunity to get on board and support you in the way that you need, right? Because why do we keep people close to us? Because in some way it's supporting us, right? Or it's supposed to be. It feels good to be in community. So let's be in community with people who can support where we are and where we're going. You know, and then if someone can't show up for the truth of who you're becoming and that expression of who you're becoming, then yeah, they don't deserve your time.
Yeah.
Period. Even if they're your mom or your whomever, you know, your sister, your brother, the whichever thing, that's when ties can be cut. And not saying to cut off completely, but you energetically don't allow them into certain spaces, and you get in community that normalizes what you're doing, normalizes where you're going. I really appreciate you bringing up the struggle one. This is good.
This is why I joined your mastermind, right? I mean, like at the time, I didn't know your story, guys. So like, I found out your entire money story later, and like all this really cool stuff, which I will share in a minute. But like, I literally just was like, I was at my wit's end. I was like, I need to get into community. And I mean, you know this, like, guys, I literally was like, Lisa, I'm signing up. Within 2 days, I hadn't even asked the price. I was like, just consider me signed up. I'm in. We didn't even do a call, nothing. I was like, I'm game. Like, this is what I wanted because of that, right? The fear, it's funny because it's like I'm working through this for months and months, right? Because the identity is so strong, so strongly tied. And I've been that for so long, like, oh my gosh, it's got to be a struggle. And I've been working through it and struggling and blah, blah, blah. So,
I have an alarm going off. I don't know if you can hear it. I'm just going to turn it off.
No, it's fine. So then, for me, it was just so crazy because I got into community. I was very clear with myself. I want a Black woman who is thriving and in her power and all about sovereignty and living their best lives unapologetically without having to, you know, keep clinging to the struggle, but just being themselves, so that my nervous system and my entire being could start to regulate and see that that was normal. That was a thing that is also possible for me. Because even as I've been expanding and traveling, and I've been doing this for years, there's still that. So I was like, I just want that to finally be integrated so that I can just step into this without constantly reaching into struggle, which was one of the things that we spoke about in the mastermind, because I was like, oh my God, I always feel the need to bring up my travel, my struggle stories, etc. You know, and and now I'm just like, hey, even during COVID, I'm posting about my travels and everything, and I don't feel the guilt, because I'm like, the truth is, it would also be it would be unethical to bring up something that I'm not really experiencing when my truth is completely different. So I've got to live in that as well, you know. But I didn't know how to do that, especially because it's like, I didn't know how to hold people, hold myself. I was great at holding people in expansion, but I didn't know how to hold myself in expansion without, you know, clinging on to the struggle story.
Yeah. And I also want to say too, for because I've heard this actually quite a bit in sessions this week. If I go to this expanded place, I won't feel connection with these people anymore. Like, I won't be able to relate to their struggle, one, and two, I'm gonna lose support because of it. Like, people aren't gonna support me when I'm doing so well. Which is ultimately this, in this particular folks case I'm remembering from sessions this week, it's ultimately this this identity of I must be saved, or there's some like victimhood identity. And I say this I want to be really clear when I say this, because in a world of systemic oppression, there are real victims, right?
Yes,
Our
very
ancestors have been
true.
real
Yes,
victims. And something
yes.
that I cannot stand about the personal development industry is this idea of like, oh, you're being the victim, as like a shaming mechanism, like, oh, you're not being true, or some
Yeah.
yeah.
How people will say, no, you're using, like, yes, I get it about systemic oppression and all this, but don't you think you're using it as a crutch or as an excuse? No, like literally, that is I can't use these things as crutches or excuses. Like,
Right.
these are very real things.
Exactly. So there's a place to understand, as we know, like real victimhood exists, right? If you experience something, if
Yeah,
somebody, kills someone, that person dies, you can be like, oh, they're playing the victim. Like, actually they're dead, so there's no opportunity,
yeah, yeah.
Um, and there's also the two sides of this. There's also a place where we can internalize that we are the victim, especially again when we see it so clearly all the time in society. There's a place where we can internalize that we are supposed to be in this place.
Mm,
Somebody else can come save us, hopefully.
yes,
And where we do internalize this identity from a disempowered place. And
yes.
so this is another reason that I like to talk to people, white people over here, people over here, because these people need to understand how they're contributing in the system. And
Yeah,
then what we get to do is to be empowered in the system and say, yeah,
yeah,
they have we've carried this experience and internalized something, and we get to choose differently. And the
yeah.
times are changing, and we get to change the times.
Mm,
And so the place that says, wherever it might live within you listening, that says, you know what, if I'm doing really well, people aren't going to support me anymore.
yeah. I
If you
used to have
have
that
that
belief, by the way.
feeling, what'd you say?
I had that belief. It
Oh, I
wasn't
had
just that
feeling
people are
too. I
going to
totally had
support me, aren't going to support me. Mine was they will hate me. They will
that.
definitely hate me.
Yeah, this is big. Thank you for naming that. I had this too,
Yeah,
even with massive amounts of mounting evidence against it.
yeah,
I still had it. And yeah, so if you recognize this within yourself, please know that it is normal. One,
yeah.
and two, I also want to normalize that you can let go of it.
Yeah.
And a really powerful experience I actually had this year was, so I learned very early on that I could get scholarships, right? And
Ah,
as a university student in the United States,
yeah.
prices are ridiculous. So in my mind, like, this was my moneymaker. Like, I was just gonna get scholarships. Oh my goodness. Look, applying for scholarships was a full-time job for me before I went to university.
But like it's so tedious. So you
Oh, it
had to
was.
turn it into a job.
So my university told me that they had never seen a student come in with more scholarships ever in the history of the university. Because I was just like, I hustled, I found them. In a lot of scholarships, I could just use the same essay or whatever. But I had internalized that I needed to basically have somebody else give me money. That
Mm,
like I wasn't gonna make my own,
mm,
but based on my identity, I could, advocate in a way that someone would give me money.
yeah.
And that held me back for, oh my gosh, that held me back for so long. And it's so interesting too, because, being a scholar, being on scholarship, being on a fellowship, in many cases, or at least in my cases, were fairly prestigious things, right?
Yes.
Like, and celebrated things.
Mm,
But
mm,
celebrated to my own detriment of my identity as
yes.
it played into my own ability to be self-sustaining.
Mm,
Um, and so I want to be clear when I say this, that the place I'm in now, I will accept a scholarship or fellowship or somebody's money, right?
Yeah.
Because
I
why
love
not?
that.
I'm worthy of it. I'll take it. The
Yeah.
distinction is that before I thought that was the only way, and I needed that. I needed
Yeah.
to be saved by someone's money, right? So this is,
Mm.
if you can see me physically, if not, you can just imagine it. I often talk about pendulum swings and the extremes that we can go to that are equally emotionally charged. So that charge was, I can't do this by myself. I need someone else to give me something. The
Yep.
other extreme I then went to, once I worked through that, pendulum swung in the opposite direction to, I cannot take anyone's money. I've got to do this, right? This is where people get stuck on what I call the independent woman pedestal.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
let's be real, you do not hear a man say, I'm an independent man. You never hear that ever. This is the a la Beyonce style independent woman
Yeah.
fallacy. Um,
Yeah.
and so, in between these two extremes is a place where the charge is not there that says,
Mm.
I can be independent, I can receive, and I don't have to be one or the other. I get to show up in my fullness. I get to know that I have an interdependent relationship with the universe and the world around me. It is safe to receive, it is safe to create for myself.
Yeah.
Um, and I can show up in any of those
Mm.
in order to, specifically around money, in order to have more money, hold more money, grow that money,
Mm.
right? So find yourself in this pendulum analogy, if you will. Where
Yeah.
is the charge strongest for you? And maybe you go back and forth between the two, saying like, I'm super independent, and then feeling like you're quote caving and asking for support, right? And the
Mm.
feeling that can have you go between the two. And I
Mm.
just want to normalize that they are all valid. There's nothing wrong with any of them. It's understanding where do you personally feel most empowered,
Mm.
and in the places where you don't, what can be shifted? What can you believe about your own identity, about who you are, that can support that shift?
Mm. Oh, thank you for sharing that. I mean, like, I resonate with that so much. So when I was at the other pendulum shift, which I think I've shared here before, which is I went off to varsity, like right after university. I had like this obsession with, oh my God, I don't want to be alone in the world. Like what's going to happen? Like my entire life at university had been, up until university, had been curated for me, even though I had this desire for travel and freedom and everything. Once
Yeah.
I finally got it, I was like, oh, someone needs to tell me what to do. Right.
Yes,
And
that part.
then it was so scary because now the big wide world is open to you. And what if, and for me, I was like, what if I make a mistake?
Mm-hmm.
What if I do the wrong thing? Oh my gosh. And then I came up with this idea. I need to get married. But I was very anti-marriage externally. So people are probably like, what? We didn't even know you had this. Like, yeah, externally, I had like my feminist stances and everything. But deep down,
Yeah.
I was like, it wasn't about the marriage itself. Because I always say this, like, I've never, and I'm still not that woman that has always been like white dresses, etc. I've always assumed that one day I'll come home and be like, oh, okay, like I'm doing this thing, get food, get like
Yeah,
someone to appreciate this thing, like get it done. And I've always assumed that I'm that person. But then I was just like, no. So after varsity, I developed this insane obsession, which
yeah.
was, I think if I get married, so even though I was traveling and doing all this epic stuff, it was at the back of my head that
Yeah.
if I get married, then at least it will be two of us making the mistakes. I won't be making the mistake on my own. I'll have someone else to do that with. And as they say in Xhosa, I went in, got engaged, and it was hot. That's literally the translation. It was hot in there, guys. I was like, no, like, wow. Okay. I was like, nope. On second thoughts, I'm willing to do my work. Like the relationship and going down the aisle with
Yeah.
the like, no, I was like, I have to pick a struggle, and I pick me. Like, I need to work on this fear. Not that I didn't love the guy, right? It was that
I'm sure he was great, whatever.
it was great, all that stuff. But the thing is, a huge part of it was I was also coming from this place of I don't want to be alone. Oh my God, I'm gonna make a bad mistake in life. Like, there is a way to do life. You have to do this, get kids, all that. And then, like, when I was on the path to that, I was like, my soul is dying. It is screaming like my life is suburbia in the US, suburbia, white picket fences, everything, PTA meetings. Oh my God, I can't see this. Like, this is not who I am. So yeah, I completely get that pendulum. And that was, so I had to swing back. And then for years, I was at the extreme opposite, which was spoken about, which is, and I swung from, I need someone to look after me. I can't do this alone. Oh my gosh, I'm not that strong, to super independent.
Right. Exactly. Two sides of the same coin. It's truly two sides of the same coin, right? Like, somebody saved me, or like, oh, I don't need anyone, so I won't what's the word? I won't burden you by asking for support, right? So it's in a similar way, telling yourself you're not worthy and relating it, projecting it in a different way on the outside world. But look, y'all, like, ask your fellow men, like, are you an independent man? Like, they don't say that. They just say, like, I'm a grown ass man. Right? This is very much a socially not womanized, but a socially ingrained concept around women, and I do think a lot of it is perpetuated by, unfortunately, the culture I come from. This, Americanized, individualistic culture.
No, but in South Africa too, my mom, like, so why I think I also swung to that was I just tapped into my childhood beliefs, where my mom would say to my sister and I, if you want to marry a doctor, be a doctor. If you want to marry a millionaire, be a millionaire. Like, it's like basically marry yourself.
Yeah, I think that's a good takeaway. That's a good interpretation.
Like, if she ever listens to this episode and we get to this, she'll be like, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. I promise you this is how she feels. It's the wildest. It's like, so growing up in that environment, I completely understand it. And I understand, like, a lot of our parents came to be who they are as mothers in that age of women being the first to go to work, to hold great positions, all that. And so we are then that generation that was raised by these women. And so we then pick up some of those deep beliefs. But it is two sides of the same coin, because you know what happened? So I need someone to look after me, I literally did attract a man that was like paying for absolutely everything, absolutely. When I say absolutely everything, I mean it. And then when I swung to the independent woman stage, and like, oh yeah, I was want to say at this part, the other side, like, I was getting gifts from men that were like holiday homes, cars, clothes. Guys, I was getting cars in my name, everything, not having to do much of anything except exist and breathe. And on the side, when I've been going through the independent woman stage, Lisa, can I please just tell you, that stage has traumatized me also, because I was like, I was paying my own dinners, even coffees. I was just like, what just happened? I went from getting all these things. Like, now I'm like paying my own dinner. What is going on? And like, I'd be like relationshiping with men who will be like, so, if we do this, you're going to have to pick up most of the tab, right? Because you're probably making more than me. I was like, what is going on? No, I'm sorry. I've been traumatized by both sides, guys. Like, I feel like extremes can miss me. Like, I want a happy middle, and maybe swinging more to the side where I'm not buying my own dinner. Thank you very much.
I love it. I wanted to hit on two things you said, because you talked about the fact that we were raised by, mothers and women who were like the first to do something.
Yeah.
There's also another huge thing we haven't talked about yet is this sense of competition.
Mm.
And when we are the first, or let's say our parents, whomever, we're the first to do something, there's this concept of like the token spot, right? Like what
Yes.
the diversity hire, quote unquote.
Yes.
And trying to compete for that one spot in a sea of white people doing something else, right?
Yeah.
And the 60s, these years that generation was going to work, there maybe was only one spot, right? Like
Mm.
that
Yes, this is
competitive spirit
true.
made sense.
Yeah.
And what I find with being in the independent woman stage is that like that fighting, like I gotta
Hasn't
compete, I
stopped.
gotta do the things, I gotta be everything to everybody, do
Yeah.
it all by myself, and my success is only real if I did it all by myself, which is a complete
Yeah.
fallacy. No one actually does everything alone.
True.
Even if you're building a
And I
business, your
suspect
clients
that's
have to
why
say
people
yes.
won't get mentors. Sorry.
What'd you say?
Sorry, please continue.
What
I'll
was your
say everything. No, I was just saying I suspect that's why people won't get coaches and mentors, especially within
Oh, yes.
sometimes a lot of Black women, they feel like they have to do it themselves. And I was
Yes.
that woman, so a lot, me. Like, guys, I'm telling you, I did swing to an extreme. Like, gosh, no.
Same. Yeah. And it's this idea that if you're asking for support, then you're failing. Right? Right when we're swung on this side. Like here it's like, if I don't get support, I'm not gonna live. Or I'm not gonna just do anything. Over here, it's if I'm asking for support, something's wrong with me if I'm asking for support. I'm failing if I'm asking for support. And I don't know how this translates in South Africa, but in the US, this concept of people who quote unquote receive handouts, this stereotype is typically applied to Black people. When people talk about the welfare system, food stamps, right, government assistance, even though statistically way more white people receive it in the US,
Yes.
there's this stigma, right? So people in this independent woman phase, that's the antithesis, right? That's the like, I'm not going to receive a handout. I'm fighting for everything I've got. And when you talked about the things your mom said, when I was a kid, my mom said, this is a little bit of a topic change, but it's relevant. My mom said that, what was her phrase? Oh, her phrase when it came to relationships, her phrase was that love is not enough. It's so funny, actually. I have this gorgeous ring, but I'm not wearing it today. But anyway, since we're talking about relationship, I'm like, oh, noticing I'm not wearing.
Well, we all like. I feel, isn't that like a thing on social media though? Like right now, love is not enough. Don't get married for love.
Oh,
Love is
really?
not
I
the
haven't seen
reason
that.
yeah, we don't get
Okay.
get married for love now.
My mom said that to me when I want to say I was 7. And she said it quite a bit. I don't know what she was going through, but she was wanting to make sure that I knew that love was not enough. And then she talked about her follow-up sentence would be about financial stability and security and stuff. And I remember having a really strong reaction, literally yelling back, or I don't know if she thought I was yelling, but I felt like I was yelling. And I called her a gold digger. I was like, that's not true, Mom, you're a gold digger. And what that moment created for me was a belief that it wasn't safe to have both. And so in my relationships, I got into, even at the beginning of now we're married, but even at the beginning of our time together, like I basically created this romanticized idea of being broke and in love. At age 7.
I'm sorry.
And I realized it. I literally manifested it. And get this, y'all. Get this. So my husband, amazing, love this man, and he's doing super great and financially now. He had also manifested this. So he's a musician. We're both musicians.
Yeah.
One of his earliest albums, it's his favorite song of his earliest albums, is literally called Young and Broke. And the lyrics
Oh
of
my
the chorus, you can find it on Spotify, listen to it if you want it right now. The lyrics of the chorus say, "Darling, there's nothing wrong with being young and broke." And he repeats it a couple times. And then the end, being young and broke and in love. And the reason I say he manifested it too is that my maiden name is Young. Okay? Like young, broke, and then we were in love. Like, yeah, he got exactly what he was singing about. And then I tried to create a remix of his song when I realized that he didn't like me remixing his song. But, we both realized, like, hey, we actually set out to be broken in love. Very different ways, but we got to the same point, and so we manifested this element of struggling around money. Like, we both apparently thought that was
It was romantic. Oh my
but
God.
we needed to like break down these constructs that were subconsciously living and first they become conscious, and then we get to parse them. We both make six figures now in our own or me multiple, but like, yeah, so we've moved past that point.
I'm glad actually, because
Acknowledge it.
wow, young and broke. But I guess that's the thing. Oh my God. You went into full rebellion against your mother because you had love and financial stability. You're like, I'm not going to be like you. You are a gold digger, and I am going to fall in love and be broke, and it's going to be romantic.
Exactly. That's what I thought. Yep.
No, I laugh because that's the one thing I've never had illusions about.
I'm glad.
Being in love and broke. For me, guys, I'm not gonna lie. If we're in love and we're broke, please know that like my nervous system is already all over the place, and I'm making an exit plan. Like I can't do it easily. Like I must really, really love you, and I love hard, but. I will admit, like, broken in love is not very romantic.
But that's the thing, right? You don't need to do it. That was what we individually created. And so all of this to say, when you kind of take stock, inventory of what are these beliefs I have around how money is supposed to go, how I'm supposed to be with money. Am I supposed to struggle with money? Am I not supposed to have more than a certain amount of money? Am I supposed to have to work really hard? Because society loves talking about how hard people work and how they, quote, earned it, or they deserve the success because they worked hard. Right? These ideas that are so deeply ingrained. And in fact, maybe, I'm not sure if you've shared this in other episodes around the mastermind, but one of the big things that came up for a number of women is the ability to be receiving more and actually selling out their programs when they weren't working really, quote unquote, hard, but rather just
chilling. No, everybody knows that's my stance in life. So that's another thing. It's like, if you expect me to work hard, that is something that has never really been seen in this lifetime. So in South Africa, we have makoti duties and like wife duties where you go to the in-laws and I was like, actually, one guy, my first ever boyfriend, dumped me because he's like, I don't think you will ever be able to do makoti duties. You're going to embarrass me with my family.
Thank you for the compliment.
I was like, wow. He was like, evidently, your parents have been very liberal with how they brought you up because you clearly don't know any of it. I was like, I don't like, honestly, I didn't even know that was a thing until we had that conversation. I was like, I can't believe I'm being dumped because it's obvious that I won't do wifely duties. Like, I was like, I didn't know that the dating was the auditioning for such, but whatever. It was so funny. So Lisa, you have dramatically changed your money story. And I love this. So after I signed up for the mastermind, I then started to read up on your Facebook. And before then, I was like, energetically, I like Lisa. So,
I
and
want to celebrate that trust. By the way, when she says I signed up, Vanille and I had never had a phone call. We had never spoken. I mean, we could say, and I do believe this is true, that we definitely communicated through the ether, but there
yeah.
was no official discussion in this 3D
I
realm.
didn't even know what the mastermind was. I had never seen a sales page. I didn't know Lisa from Adam. I was like, you are the person I want to sign up with. And like, I just made the decision based on what my guides and my spirit and my energy told me. And that was that. Like, there was just no anything. And I don't regret that. It's been like one of my best decisions. I've absolutely loved it.
I want to celebrate that because that is an abundant way of being, of saying, I'm trusting something within me. But all the way, also, by the way, from my side, I hadn't known who Vanille was. A former coach of hers posted in a Facebook group, I have this client looking for da da da. Her name wasn't even in the post, but I was just like,
no,
oh
my name was not in the post.
that woman. I just knew whoever she was talking about. I was like, I love this woman. Like I love Vanille. I didn't know it was Vanille. It was just a person being vaguely described in a Facebook post by somebody else.
Yeah.
But to make these, and I think I want to highlight this because gifts, when we talk about living from our gifts, it means we trust our intuition. It means we trust ourselves. And so in a world that says we must have data, I want to celebrate that you took your personal data, which was your energetic awareness and alignment, which is the most abundant thing we'll ever feel. Like, even if your bank account says 0 and you are feeling this full energetic alignment,
I didn't even know what the price was, by the way, guys. I was like, I don't care. Like, I was like, I knew it would be 5 figures in US dollars, but I was like, I just don't care. It's a yes for me. And Lisa was like, you don't even know the pricing. You haven't seen the sales page. I was like, I am in. Like, my entire self is in. I love it when I make decisions like that. And I've actually very rarely regretted a decision that was made from that space. And I love what you say, that is an abundant way to make decisions. Because a lot of my decisions that I make that are like that about travel, countries that I go to, I won't even know how expensive a country is. I won't even know the currency of the country. And I'll be like, that's where I'm headed next. I don't need to know everything else. Everything else will come together. And that's how I've always traveled, just like how I did with you. And I mean, look at us now. Like, it was the right decision. But what I find, back to intuition before we go into the money stuff, is that a lot of people, their intuition says yes. They don't trust that, right? And what they do is then they go and they look for all the data, all the logical stuff, all this, right, to support what their intuition is saying. Exactly. I'm just like, it doesn't work like that. I was just like, if my intuition is at a yes, I know the money is going to be at a yes as well. It's all going to come. I know what I need to learn in this program is going to be here. Yes. It's a yes for a reason. And my entire being said yes. So yeah, the first time I ever spoke to Lisa was literally in the mastermind. She had not seen me, my voice, nothing. And she'd heard my voice through the voice notes, but she hadn't seen me. We didn't know anything about each other. And I was just like, this is good for me. It's perfect for me.
That's how, and Nathan, my husband, when I first met him, I honestly didn't even think he was physically attractive, and it wasn't because he wasn't. I look at him now, I'm like, oh, you're so hot, whatever. My soul saw his soul. My attraction was backwards to the way most people talk about meeting someone and falling in love, right? It's like they see something and then they get to know their mind and then they have an emotional connection. Mine was the exact opposite. It was like my soul was like, whoa. And then my emotions were like, whoa, my soul did a thing. And then I got logical about it. And then one day I was like, oh, he's pretty good looking. I want to normalize this way of operating in a world that says, data.
Yeah.
Because another thing too is that so many of the world's most successful people, household names, know this, and operate this way, right? That is why you see people can take such massive risks, get $300 million loans, because they're trusting something. They are, to bring us full circle to the beginning, they are creating something, and they're trusting the vision of what they're creating. Okay. And then, because the world's like data, they find ways to justify and share. And if you listen to many interviews, you can actually hear people dance around it. They don't specifically say it always. They might. I've only experienced it very rarely, but people will say, like, I just went for it. Or they might try to justify with data. But the point here is that this part, the operation on trust, the willingness to give away the last dollar and then the next day receive the job or hundreds of thousands or whatever.
My whole life, you've just defined. This is how I literally operate for most things. Like I say, with countries, it's like people are like, you don't even research a country. I've never researched a country when I landed in that country. I'm just like, oh. And sometimes I'll be like, oh, I don't like with Sri Lanka, I don't like booking Airbnbs that I share with people. But for whatever reason, I was like, I'm going to book an apartment 3 days or 4 days after I land in Sri Lanka. And then I'm going to just book this random house where it's shared with this other woman called Mangala. And now she's like my Sri Lankan mom, right? And it was just so random that I made that decision when I've never made that decision like that before. And I was just like, for some reason in this country, I need to go here, and I don't question it. And it literally changed my entire life. I mean, like I moved to Sri Lanka. It changed my whole life, that one small decision. But like, I didn't try to justify it. I didn't go like, oh, why am I doing this? I never do this. I was just like, this is how I'm going to go about this entire experience, And I think that has changed. This is, for me, I've had like the most incredible travel experiences. And a lot of that has been just through trusting intuition. And it doesn't have to make sense. Like for most people, they'd be like, oh my God, it's a high ticket program. Don't you think you want to first investigate, do this, do that? I was like, no. Like, why not? Like, my intuition says yes. I know at the end of the day, I'm going to say yes. All that investigation, I'll just figure it out in the process. So I love that. And
I actually just gave, was that last week? Yeah, I actually just paid $50,000 US in cash before going to an event to hire my next coach. And I'm just like, cool. And the interesting thing was, and I know you want to talk about my money story, so obviously you can hear now I'm feeling quite abundant to just give 50K to somebody. But I knew before she was hosting a 3-day event. When it comes to big decisions, I'm 100% decisive because I'm operating from this place. Now ask me about what I'm eating for dinner tonight, and then you can hear like, I don't know, maybe there's food up in my feelings. Because clearly I'm not operating from trust when it comes to my dinner. But when it comes to important decisions that will put me on a particular trajectory in my life, yes, 100% operating from trust. And for those listening, if you do travel, I think travel is a really, or even if you're just listening and going, how do I cultivate this trust they were talking about? I don't trust anything. Travel and immersing yourself in a place that you do not know, especially if you don't know people in it to support you, is a really great way to learn to trust your intuition. Because if you don't understand the language, if you don't understand what direction you're going in or how things are operating there, you have to start listening to something. So where's the direction coming from? It's going to start coming from within you. So I love that. Recommend, even if you're traveling with a plan, to let yourself get lost for a day or let yourself not have a plan and see what comes to you to do. as a means of practice.
And not travel, and I think also solo travel, right? Which is what you've also done a lot of. So what I see a lot of people do is that like, oh, I'll only travel when we're in a group or when we're with buddies. But then you have other people that you can rely on. But like, I really tell people to do your solo traveling, right? It's so, so important. Yeah.
Totally.
So guys, this has been amazing. I will have Lisa on another time to talk about.
I love it.
So she has this incredible story about how she made $100,000 in 2 weeks and how she extended to that level. I wanted us to get there, but we will. I'm going to have her on again for another podcast. So do stay tuned. Lisa, people are probably listening to me and they've heard all the other mastermind clients that you've got talk about you, and they're wondering, how can I get this woman, and how do I get hold of her and have a conversation with her and learn about her programs? How can people get hold of you and work with you?
Yes, the easiest way. Oh, I just realized, like, will my name have changed on the internet by the time this airs? It might have. Yeah. You know what? I'll keep it up just for this. Okay, so my name, Lisa Denon Young. I'm the only one in the world with this name. So you can find it LiSaDenNenYoung, young, like not old, but young. I'm super active on Facebook, Instagram. My website's lisadenyoung.com. So you can find me and message me in any of those places. I also have the music medicine membership, which is if you're wanting to experience what it is to be in a program, the membership is actually an opportunity to receive bits and pieces of the djembe that that Madhya shared. It's basically a sound healing and using music as medicine to support the healing and clearing of these various, these energetic blocks, emotional blocks, ancestrally held wounds, etc., so that you can call it and amplify more of what you want to experience. And even just with various sound healings that folks have attended over time, people talk about more money came as a result of this. I made the decision, I took the leap, I did the thing. So that in and of itself, you can experience the changes there. And what's really cool also about the music medicine membership is that it's low cost, it's meant to be accessible, and there are sponsored positions. So some of the mastermind women actually offer to sponsor those who don't have the money and want to be in the membership. So this is really the place where I'm focusing most of my attention in the name of collective empowerment, in the name of us coming together from around the world, having our voices elevated and doing it in a way that's truly liberating. So that would be my first recommendation. I do have private coaching available. I don't know if it will be available by the time this airs. It might be sold out. But you're welcome to check. You're welcome to check. Absolutely. I would invite you to reach out, send a message, say hi. I love socializing.
Guys, Lisa is awesome, as you can hear, as you've heard, and you can see, hear. Thank you so much for your time, Lisa. And guys, do reach out to Lisa. If you guys have enjoyed this episode, please go to iTunes, look for the Money Magic Podcast and give us a 5-star rating and leave us a review. Thank you for your comments on YouTube. We love those. Thank you for, and do follow us on Podbean or comment on Podbean as well. And do share this podcast episode with all your friends and family. And if you're loving the Money Magic Podcast, go check out all the other episodes with all the other guests that I've had. They were equally as fun. Thank you so much, Lisa. Thank you so much, Money Magicians. I will see you guys in the next episode.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Bye.